let's get this show started. This is my city. Actually, it's our city. This is Chicago on the cover of National Geographic, July 2013. The Windy City, City in a Garden, Siberia, the city of big shoulders. Before he was a world-renowned film director, Stanley Kubrick was a staff photographer for Look magazine. And in 1949, he took this photograph. He was assigned to photograph Chicago's glamorous and gritty sides for an article that was entitled Chicago, City of Extremes. And in 1949, Chicago was extreme. Chicago's population was 3.6 million. This was the most people that had ever lived in Chicago. Even more interesting, 50 years earlier, in 1900, 1.7 million people lived in Chicago. And only London, Paris, Berlin, and New York were bigger than Chicago. Yeah, 60 years earlier, in 1840, Chicago was a backwater frontier town with a population of less than 4,000 people. So in 1900, Chicago was the fastest growing city in the world. Not only that, Chicago was the fastest growing city that the world had ever seen. And it was this explosive growth that marked the emergence of a modern city. And Chicago rightfully held the title of City of the Century. Since 2007, more than half the people in the world live in cities. Today, that's 4.4 billion people. And that number is going to double by 2050, when 70% of people will live in cities. But that's a good thing, because 80% of the world's gross domestic product is generated in cities. Cities are where we are most creative. They're where we are most energetic. They are dynamic. They are powerful. This century is going to be the century of the city. But cities are also one of the biggest contributors to climate change. And climate change is the existential problem of our time. We have to solve this one. We can't keep destroying our planet. Cities consume about 2/3 of the world's energy and create about 70% of global greenhouse gases. So cities need to be fixed. We have to remake our cities for radical sustainability. Let's take a look at what a sustainable city is. What does it look like? A sustainable city is a city that makes you healthier. You know that photograph I started out with, where it's like you're coming into Chicago, here's this glowing carpet of beautiful golden light. That was a glowing carpet of light pollution. And the Nat Geo article, the whole issue was about the perils of urban light pollution. And Chicago was the poster child. And in fact, the article cited that light may cause an early spring, and that the World Health Organization had included light pollution as a possible, probable carcinogen. Between 2017 and 2022, the city undertook a smart lighting program and changed over 280,000 sodium vapor fixtures to modern high-tech LED cutoff fixtures. Aha. Today, Chicago is darker and healthier. You can make change, but we need to find these types of solutions for our cities. Air pollution, water pollution, noise pollution are the problems that we have to solve to make cities sustainable. A sustainable city is a resilient city. Resiliency is the ability to adapt to changing conditions. Sustainable buildings and infrastructure are a big part of the solution, but it has to happen at every scale and for every building. Even at really tiny scales, like like this one. This is a hamburger stand. This is McDonald's Chicago flagship restaurant. My studio designed it in 2019. It has a solar pergola that's composed of over 1,000 photovoltaic panels, which shade the site and the building, so it uses less energy. And at the same time, it generates about 60% of the building's electrical needs. The site is generously landscaped and has a special paving that makes it 92% permeable, which means that when it rains, we store stormwater on the site rather than sending it to the city sewers, which are overloaded. Resilience has to happen at every scale. We worked on the Chicago Riverwalk for about 16 years, starting in 2000. The project was amazing. It took this little leftover piece of urban land along a pretty unpopular, murky Chicago River, and it turned it into an amazing urban park that captured the imagination and the affection, not only of Chicagoans, but everybody who visits our city. But, thank you. But, some of you may have seen the Riverwalk, but it looks like this. This is a scene straight out of a disaster film, right? Climate change is bringing severe weather to Chicago. In the past 30 years, our May rainfall, May, by the way, is our rainiest month, so it's the hardest to deal with. May rainfall has increased 42%. This has put a monumental task in front of the city, handling and managing stormwater. But this isn't a mistake. The Riverwalk is designed to flood. In extreme rainfall events, we can store an additional 6 feet of water in the river, increasing the amount of storage available to the city for rainfall. All urban systems need to be built for resilience like this one. It's not optional anymore. Okay, so a sustainable city has to be healthy, it has to be resilient. But maybe the most important thing that a resilient city needs to be is it needs to be livable. This is where we're productive. If we're not productive, why live in a city? Another way of thinking about it is you have to like to live in cities. A sustainable city is one that is inclusive. Our urban systems, including housing, education, transportation, yes, public spaces, need to be fair and equitable. I've spent a lot of my career working on urban systems. In fact, some of our work, most people don't even consider architecture. We've designed train stations, we've designed utilities, everything from chillers to substations, stuff that's in the cracks and crevices of the city at the edges, basically the interconnective tissue of the cities. But this is what we need to live our lives in the city, to live productive lives. Right now, we're doing a new park on this little site. I'm working with Ramona Westbrook, another Chicago architect, and a great multicultural team. And the park will be dedicated to John Baptiste DuSable, the first non-Indigenous person to live in Chicago. He was a trader. He came to Chicago around 1790, and he built his business on the north bank of the Chicago River. The mouth of the river at that point was up about at Michigan Avenue, so this site is actually maybe a mile away from where the farm was. But the farm isn't on the water anymore, so we like this one. The park was dedicated in 1985, but the city didn't have money for design or construction, so it sort of went nowhere. But now they have money. We are in design, and it should be constructed by 2026, which is a great thing. As part of our design process, we've been searching out public opinion and ideas about DuSable and about this park. So when we were asked to participate in the Chicago Architectural Biennial last year, we jumped at the chance to showcase the project, and we built this little folly, this little attraction on the actual site. And it gave us a chance to ask some questions that we were coming up with that we thought were really important. Like, who was DuSable? Actually, we don't know that much about DuSable. The records are really fuzzy. We think that he was born around 1745 on Haiti. We think that his father was French. We think that his mother was African. She was probably enslaved. He married a Potawatomi, Kitihawa, in 1788 in Cahokia, Illinois. They had 2 children. He was in Chicago for about 10 years, and in 1800, he sold his farm and his business to John Kinsey. He got 6,000 pounds for it, which doesn't sound like much, but that in today's money is about $1.5 million. So he was very successful, and he left Chicago a wealthy man. We don't really know what he looked like. This little picture that you see here was done in 1884, so it was 100 years after he was living in Chicago. But we do have some information, mostly from letters of people who met him and then recorded meeting him. And they said that he was a very large man, a handsome Negro, and very well educated. So the park will help us understand DuSable and what he did for our city, in our city. But there's another question that designing the park we wanted to answer all the time. Who found Chicago? Ironically, by the mid-19th century, DuSable was mostly forgotten. And John Kinsey, the guy he sold his house to, he was credited to being the founder of Chicago. But during the 1933 Century of Progress, African American community groups organized to restore DuSable's reputation and heritage and his accomplishments earlier than Kinsey. In a lot of ways, this park is a result of their effort. And so, yes, DuSable found Chicago. The Potawatomi found Chicago. When DuSable arrived, the Great Lakes had been occupied by the Anishinaabe Alliance, the Potawatomi, the Odawa, and the Ojibwe for more than a millennia. They found it. Who found Chicago? In 1905, my grandmother, alone and penniless, an immigrant from Poland, which at that point was believed to be the poorest place in Europe, if not the planet, came to Chicago. She found Chicago. And like millions of others, she made it hers. We all found Chicago. So the design of the park, it'll be a green oasis, it'll be resilient, it'll be healthy. It'll be inspired by DuSable and his entrepreneurship and his courage. It'll be inspired by the Potawatomi. I mean, they took care of the land. They were stewards for more than a millennia. And it'll be about the people who have come here, who have worked hard, who have made lives in Chicago. It'll be a place where we can share those stories. We can share where we came from. And it'll be a place where we can plan the future of Chicago. So, I don't know, in 2 years, I hope you visit this park. And when you're there, I hope you remember that by finding Chicago, you became responsible for this place, that you are part of the solution. You're part of the solution to make this place healthy, resilient, inclusive, that it's your job to build the radically sustainable Chicago of the future that we need, that we deserve. That by finding Chicago, we people who found Chicago, this is our duty and our responsibility.